The Forced Vows. The little church sat at the edge of Dusty Creek, its wooden beams creaking under the hot noon sun. Inside, the townsfolk crowded into pews, whispering and pointing at the young groom who stood at the altar. Ethan Callahan was only 23, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair slicked back, and his jaw clenched in anger. He had been born and raised on the ranch his father built, and though he was young, he was already a man of responsibility. But nothing in his life had prepared him for this. His father had spoken the night before in that cold, commanding voice that brooked no argument. "You'll marry her tomorrow, Ethan. The ranch needs the deal. I've already given my word." Ethan had slammed his fist against the table. "Marry a stranger? A woman I've never even met. She's from a good family. And you'll do as I say," his father replied, his gray eyes hard. And now, here he stood at the altar, his fists trembling at his sides. The doors creaked open, and the murmur of the crowd hushed. She entered. Clara Hayes. Ethan had expected a fresh-faced young girl, like the ones he sometimes danced with at socials. Instead, his bride was nothing of the sort. She was older, nearly 30, maybe more. Her hair was the color of chestnuts, braided neatly beneath a veil. Her features were soft but marked by years of hardship, faint lines at the corners of her eyes, a maturity in her gaze that no 23-year-old could match. Whispers rippled through the church. "She's too old for him. Why would a Callahan boy marry her? It won't last." Clara walked with dignity despite the sting of their gossip. She had endured far worse than whispers. Her family had fallen into ruin after her father's debts swallowed their land. Marriage was not something she had sought, but something pressed upon her as desperately as Ethan had been pressed into it. At the altar, Ethan did not take her hand at first. His jaw was tight, his pride raw. But when the preacher cleared his throat, Ethan finally, reluctantly, placed his hand in hers. Her skin was warm. Her fingers trembled, though her expression stayed calm. The vows were spoken quickly, but to Ethan they felt like chains clamping down around him. When it was done, when the preacher declared them husband and wife, the silence in the church was thick. A few half-hearted claps echoed, and the couple walked down the aisle together, strangers bound for life. Outside, Ethan turned to her. His voice was clipped. "I didn't want this." Clara met his eyes, her own steady. "Neither did I. But we will endure it, somehow." They rode back to the Callahan ranch in silence. The sun was sinking low, painting the prairie in orange light. To Ethan, the ride felt like a funeral march. When they arrived, Ethan's father greeted them with satisfaction. "Good. Now the land is secure." Clara dismounted gracefully and looked around the ranch, the sprawling barns, the cattle, the workers bustling about. It was more than she had seen in years, yet she felt no triumph. She was unwanted here, an intruder in the young man's life. That night, in the room that was now theirs, Ethan stood by the window, refusing to look at her. Clara quietly removed her veil and placed it on the chair. She did not demand affection, nor did she beg for kindness. She simply lay down on her side of the bed, leaving a chasm of silence between them. And so began their marriage. Two strangers, bound against their will, beneath the weight of family and town expectations. But none in Dusty Creek could have imagined what would grow from that union. What followed left the town speechless. Days turned into weeks. At first, Ethan avoided Clara. He threw himself into ranch work, riding out before dawn and returning after dusk. At meals, he ate quickly, rarely speaking. Clara, however, carried herself with quiet grace. She cooked, tended the house, and little by little began helping on the ranch when no one else would. The ranch hands noticed before Ethan did. "Your wife's got grit," one of them remarked after seeing Clara calm a spooked horse. "She's tougher than she looks." Clara did not complain about hard work. When storms rolled in, she was out in the mud beside the men, pulling tarps over supplies. When a calf was lost in the river, she tied up her skirts and waded in to help. Her hands blistered, but she did not falter. Ethan couldn't ignore her forever. One evening, after a long day, he found her in the barn mending a torn saddle. Her hair had slipped loose, strands sticking to her damp face. She looked up at him, not with anger, but with quiet determination. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said stiffly. She smiled faintly. It's my home now too, isn't it? Something in his chest shifted, though he said nothing. The gossip in town grew louder. Some mocked Ethan for having an older bride. Others pitied Clara, whispering that Ethan would surely leave her for someone younger. But when they saw Clara riding alongside Ethan, working as fiercely as any ranch hand, the whispers began to falter. Then came the drought. The summer sun burned hotter than anyone could remember. Streams dried up, grass withered, and cattle grew weak. Many ranches around Dusty Creek began to fail. It was Clara who saved the Callahan Ranch. She studied old ledgers and remembered techniques her father once used. "Dig deeper wells," she told Ethan. "Rotate the herds, drive them toward the hidden springs in the canyon." Skeptical but desperate, Ethan listened. Together, they led the men into the canyon, digging where Clara insisted. And there, water, clear and cold, gushed from the earth. The ranch was saved. Word spread quickly. "It was his wife's doing," folks whispered in awe. "That older woman, she saved the Callahans." Ethan saw her differently now. She was not a burden. She was his partner. One night, as they sat on the porch, the stars stretching endless above them, Ethan finally spoke the words he had been holding back. "I was wrong about you, Clara." His voice was low, earnest. "You've given more to this ranch than I ever have." She looked at him, her eyes shining softly. "I never wanted to be your enemy, Ethan. Only your wife." For the first time since their wedding, he reached for her hand, not reluctantly, but willingly. She squeezed it, and in that moment, the distance between them dissolved. Months passed, and the ranch flourished. Ethan and Clara became inseparable, working side by side, their bond deepening with every hardship and triumph. And when Clara's belly began to swell with child, the town fell silent. The woman they had mocked, the woman they had called too old, was carrying the next Callahan heir. Ethan treated her with a tenderness no one had ever seen from him before, protective, proud, deeply in love. At the church where they had once been forced into vows, they now stood together by choice, hand in hand, their love undeniable. The same townsfolk who had once scoffed at their marriage now spoke with admiration. "Did you see the way he looks at her? Like she's the only woman in the world." And so, what began as a forced unwanted marriage became a story that left Dusty Creek speechless, a love stronger than gossip, deeper than pride, and truer than anyone had dared to believe.